What's up?
Not much, Jeff. How's it going? This is John Duncan.
What's up, Johnny?
Oh, not too much. I just thought I'd join you for a little while here on the radio.
Man, Johnny, people don't know this, but Johnny Duncan is an old friend of mine. He was a brown belt at Texas Karate Institute back in 1972 when I first started karate over at Hillcrest, Texas Karate Institute. How you doing, Johnny?
I remember that, yeah. Great days, weren't they?
Oh, they were. I guess you remember my first workout. You were there. You and Larry Wheeler, Keith Yates.
Absolutely. Those were good times. That was a great summer. I got my black belt that August.
Was it 72 or 73?
I got my black in 72. I got it just right after that summer. I got my black from Alan Steen. And that's the most life-changing event I think I've ever had. You know, the black belt test with Steen and Skipper Mullins and all those guys, those old tough guys from the Blood and Guts days were there, and it was something you had to earn. It was one of those days where there's no easy day.
It was more like assault.
Oh man!
If you survived, you wanted it to be rough. I said you really wanted it to be rough. Because
something that it was a rite of passage, you know. That's something that I don't see as much anymore. A lot, you know. Every corner has a Taekwondo school on it, and so many schools just don't have a rite of passage. It's just almost a given that you go so many classes and you get a black belt, and it doesn't have the depth of meaning when you do that. I believe it's something that you actually have to earn. You have to put some sweat and some blood and some time and. You have to really want to do it. It's something that it's like guys going through buds and Navy SEALs. You know, I think there was a point in my black belt test where I had to decide I was willing to die. There to get it.
Well, I used to say this when I used to compete, and sometimes train. When I was trained with Billy Jackson, I would sit there and I'd say, like, the last thing I'll ever do, this is it, because you had to focus that hard on your defense. Because not only did you want to win, but you had to survive.
And that's what enabled me, you know, throughout my life to be able to set goals, you know, and accomplish things that I wanted to do because I knew I could do it. If I set my mind on it, I could do it because I did it once when I was younger, and I knew that there wasn't anything tougher than that. Whatever I wanted to do, if I really gave it everything I had and went through the steps, I could get to it.
You know, that's a fact. You know, now we live in a point-and-click society. I think, as a general rule, most people have a little touch of ADD. And
well, multitasking is just another word for ADD, right?
Yeah, in other words, like a short attention span. I mean, you know, when we were growing up, people would slap you upside your head. What's the matter? Are you stupid? Pay attention.
Exactly.
You know, and nowadays everybody kind of frowns on that. But, you know, I'm telling you, you know, sometimes that type of language and that type of treatment gets people to snap to, you know, instead of giving them that kind of freedom to wander.
Well, you know, I think that there was a little bit more common sense in those days, but it was brutal. I think in the martial arts, our training at TKI was pretty brutal, you know, by and large. The first night I ever went to karate, my instructor was Fred Wren over at the East Dallas School.
Well, that's brutal right there.
Yeah, he cracked my ribs on the first night. And nowadays, you know, I just went home and wrapped them up and came back the next Thursday, you know. I did what I was supposed to do. I didn't know that was anything weird. And I didn't bother to tell my parents because I was afraid I'd get in trouble.
Well,
I was just a kid.
I think a lot of it has to do with pride. In other words, a lot more pride back then. You didn't want anybody to think you're a pussy. And, and you definitely didn't want to think that about yourself.
And at some point, you realized that whatever you said, you had to be able to back it up. Gosh, I remember one time. I think I was a green belt or something, and I was back in the break room there, and there was a black belt on one of the benches, and I put it on, and Ren walked back there and saw me with it on.
Right.
And he said, "Okay, come out here. You want to wear it? You got to back it up." And he beat the living tar out of me. I was like 15 years old, kind of cocky.
Right.
And he said, "You can put it on anytime you want to. You just have to be able to back it up." I said, "Yes, sir."
So that day you had to back it up.
That was a hard lesson.
Was Fred over at Hillcrest, or was that over at East Dallas?
No, he was in East Dallas.
Oh, okay, over Garland Road?
Yeah, on Garland Road. That's where I started.
Oh, was it really?
And Charles Armstrong, you remember him?
Yeah, I know who he is.
You know, he died this last year.
Right, he was a Marine, right?
Yeah, once he left Dallas and he went to Vietnam, I think he went 3 tours to Nam, and he was a career Marine. He had gone to Officer Candidate School. Really a great coach. I think Chuck was one of these guys that just had the ability to incite, loyalty and drive and motivate people. And, it was good that he went to the Marines because that's exactly what they needed. But we sure missed him when he left. He was really, really the motivator there for a long time.
Yeah, he was he had a lot. He touched a lot of different people as far as some of the old school fighters. And I remember seeing him fight in U.S. championships. I think it was 72 or 73. And he did pretty good. And he came up with a lot of good guys.
Yeah, he wasn't a great tournament fighter, but he set the world record for chin-ups.
He did.
And he was a good fighter, and he had a warrior's heart,
Right.
And I think, he could get out there and scrap with just anybody. But he never really focused on being, a tournament champion. He was too busy with his Marine evolution there. He was already in Officer Candidate School and finishing up college. He had a degree in English.
Well, when I met you, you were going to – didn't you go to SMU?
I did a little bit. I kind of went everywhere once.
You did? But you were a psychology major, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
Yeah, I did a little bit of that, but it kind of got boring for me. I think I majored in, health and sports science for a while, which was kind of – I could relate that back to the martial arts, which
right.
Was really what I was doing for a living until about 1976. I worked for Alan Steen mostly and ran the East Dallas School, as a head instructor until 76. And then I decided if I was ever going to go back to college, I probably needed to, and I did. And then I just kept going for a while.
Right. Well, you were a good martial artist. You were the best kicker. You and Skipper Mullins, two of the best kickers I've ever seen.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
You could kick the wall behind your head. I mean, you could stand against the wall and take your foot, and with the ball of your foot, kick the wall.
I remember those days. I sure miss that cartilage.
Yeah, those hips wear out, don't they?
Yeah, I've got to get a new hip on the 16th of October. I'm going in for a total hip replacement on my right side.
Are you really? Well, good luck on that.
Yeah.
Bill Wallace had both of his done. So, I mean, and then Margaret Beasley, Bob Beasley's wife, had hers done. And Carl Whitaker, I think he had his done. I mean, I could name them off for an hour.
Oh, yeah. John Worley, a lot of guys, have had it. I talked to Bill Wallace about it once, and he told me some ideas about getting ready for the surgery and rehab and so forth. And so did John Worley, gave me a lot of information.
Right.
So I feel pretty confident. The doc's going to give me it's a little bit larger prosthesis, so it won't pop out as easily, and it's more athletic. I still work out. I really have never given up working out. I always do.
You always stayed with the martial arts? When I saw your post recently, I didn't know that you had been working out continuously, and I was real happy to see you still doing it.
Oh, I love it, and I kind of focused on some other things. When I ended up moving to Norman, Oklahoma in 1978, and I was going to get a PhD. I got a scholarship to do that. And I did get a PhD, but I didn't really want to be a professor at that point in time. I still had that drive to do martial arts and to find some kind of adrenaline. So I became an undercover narcotics agent for the State Bureau of Narcotics. And I did that for 27 years and retired in 2007 as the chief agent of the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics. Well, throughout that time, I got into using more of a realistic self-defense, hand-to-hand type combat, a lot of control tactics that you might use, and then trying to merge hand-to-hand combat with shooting pistols, because quite often it's not like being on the range where you just can stand there and there's a target down there and you draw and you shoot it. There's a guy on top of you trying to hit you in the head with a pipe, and now you're trying to keep him from doing that, and meanwhile you're trying to get your pistol out. So
right.
I got into a little bit different style of fighting. I think nowadays, people like Moni Isaac and Jim Wagner and some of those guys call it reality-based. Of course, back when Fred Wren punched me in the face, it was pretty reality-based.
Yeah, it is. In other words, you got to be able. It's not what you can do; it's what you can take. Has a lot to do with it.
I think the fighter's heart. I've done a lot of different styles of martial arts over the years, and I think one, you got to be willing to get hit, and you got to be willing to scrap. But you really have to have the heart, and that's one thing. It's really hard to teach people that. That's something you have to bring out and grow in someone, rather than just tell them what it is and they do it. You can't teach it. You have to let people grow into it.
Well, a lot of people that do this type of training, they do it because it's hard, not because it's easy. And that's what my program has been together for 21 years now. And that's the reason it's lasted as long as it has, is because I challenge people from the first day they walk in. And I would just say,
well, I've followed you a long time, on online and stuff, and I've looked at the white collar boxing program, and I just thought from square one that was an outstanding program, and I like the way that you designed it. Anybody can get in there and really make themselves better on so many different levels.
Right. Well, in other words, like the emphasis, what everybody thinks they're getting into is conditioning, and of course that's one of the byproducts of the program. But after the first year, I converted it over and made everybody start doing martial arts through belt ranking and competing. And the reason I did that is because my conscience started getting to me, and I started realizing that in this ADD society that people, you can only do repetition so long. If there's not a learning curve and a reward-based attached to it, then, just think about it. We've had hot yoga, Bikram yoga. You've had step aerobics. You had speed weights. You had Tai Bo. Think of all the different fad training that has come and gone and just died. The next one would be CrossFit. As good as CrossFit is, it's not going to hang around for a long time.
Well, I think what's kept me working out is that it was a skill-based thing.
Exactly.
Not only was I getting my exercise in, but I was learning something that keeps me alive, that I can see as an art, that I had a love for, and I was deepening my understanding of that and my abilities at that while I was staying in shape.
Right.
And some of these things, it's just mindless repetition. It doesn't have a goal other than physical conditioning, and I don't see why you can't do both. You can actually do self-development more over and above just physical fitness development. And bring the whole person in. I think you've got your emotional life and the ability to identify positive feelings and everything with something, and then the mental life, the ability to really learn, and even the spiritual life, comes together because I think if you really understand the martial arts, it's a spiritual thing.
Right. Well, a long time ago when I first met you, I said, man, this guy's a freak. He's got long hair. He reminded me of a hippie from the 60s. And I said, man, you fit that profile. No wonder you were so good in the DEA.
I
you could blend.
Working there. I was actually a pretty clean-cut guy, although girls back in that time, we're talking about late 60s, early 70s.
They like that look.
If you didn't grow your hair out, man,
you weren't going to get horizontal.
About 3/4 of the women out there for you. And so, I grew my hair out, but if you look down at the bottom of my blue jeans, I had my cowboy boots on.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the way we were in Texas. You had long hair and you wore boots. That was I guess we invented it here in Texas.
I think we did, actually.
In 72, 73. Yeah. Back before then, it was like you had the jocks, then you had the freaks and the hippies, and then you had, the nerds, the studious people, the normal people. And then,
absolutely.
And then at some point, and you had the cowboys and the rednecks, and they all kind of came together around 73, 72, somewhere in that period. They started all coming together in one group with a Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings movement.
Yeah, and then later it was Stevie Ray Vaughan. And
oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Austin blues music came into it. It was great.
Yeah, it was. Well, hey, I have a question for you. You worked for the government for how many years?
Well, I was with the Narcotics Bureau for 27 years, and I'm a professor at a university now at OU, University of Oklahoma.
Well, what is it like working with the bureaucracy in the federal government? Is it tough, as far as getting things done or making changes?
I see so much waste. Jeff, to be honest, I spent, there's times where I spent $1 million in a day, and this is later on after I was an administrator. I retired as the chief agent, but we'd have money, and rather than send it back, which if you send it back, they punished you. You didn't get as much the next year. And rather than send it back, I'd figure out, okay, we need some new rifles. We need some new submachine guns. We need some new bulletproof vests. We need another 10, 15 cars over here. And, man, I'd have all these purchase orders by the end of the day all ready to go, and I'd have it all laid out. We'd have to spend that money or give it back. And now, the problem is we spent it because we had it, not because we I'm giving up a lot here, and telling this stuff on myself and on the way government seemed to work to me. We had earmarks, and I was with the State Narcotics Bureau, but I was cross-designated as a DEA agent for a while, and a good part of my career, and sometimes in other federal agencies I was cross-designated, and we were still using federal money, and it was a waste a lot of times. For example, we got several $1 million to train all of the different task forces in the state on how to raid clandestine drug labs and wear all this protective equipment. Well, we were spending probably $5,000 a person just on giving them equipment, and they got to take it home with them. They got to take it back to their department. 2 years later, those guys had already moved into different assignments. The equipment was already defunct. I mean, the $5,000, the self-contained breathing apparatus, all of the really high-end chemical detectors and things like that we were using when we go in a drug lab to see if there's poison gas, so that to get out and how to be safe in it. All that stuff was not every bit of it, not 100% of it, but I guess at least half of it. I tried to do an inventory about 5 years later to see who was qualified to go in labs and who had equipment, and nobody knows where all that stuff went. It just went down the drain.
Well, that's interesting because, recently in the conspiracy word-of-mouth press that we get, everybody talks about, the federal government bought 10 million rounds of Glock 40 caliber ammunition. And then you have, and so that might make sense about where some of this stuff is going, because if they don't have a designation for the money, they just have to spend it one way or the other.
Hell, I got that much in my garage.
Well, you're ready for whatever's coming. I'll promise you that.
I definitely am ready, but I don't have 10 million rounds.
Right, I understand.
But I used to buy ammunition by the pallet.
Right.
I would go through myself back when I was a shooter, and I did win state in the pistol championships, and I was a grandmaster shooter. But I went through about 50,000, 60,000 rounds a year.
Man, no wonder government's so expensive. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, and that doesn't count submachine guns and shotguns. I didn't shoot shotguns as much, that was just not as fun, but we shot a lot of submachine guns. We shot assault carbines like the M16s. We used those a lot. And then we did precision rifles, sniper rifles in .308 caliber.
Right. Well, I don't know where our government's heading, and I don't know if government knows where it's heading. My guess is they probably do, but we're not going to be the first one. We'll be the last ones to find out about it. I
think you're right there. I'm a little worried about the way things are going too.
I mean, what's your slant on everything there? Because I'm worried.
Well, I've seen an assault on human freedom, and I mean, we're talking freedom here, right?
Right, the Bill of Rights, exactly. Right.
And so I have to say just straight up that during my career as a narcotics agent, I watched human freedoms erode, and I watched search and seizure law, for example. There was a guy that went to an auction. He was out of Atlanta, and he was a black man.
Right.
And he went to an auction on a regular basis, and it was a cash auction, and he used the products that he bought for his business, and it was purely legitimate.
Right.
He shows up at the airport in Atlanta. DEA profiles him. They search him. They find he's got $10,000, and they take his money. They seized his money. Finally, they let him go, but they filed a case against the money because they said it was drug money.
Well, that's funny. And that there is you're not supposed to take more than $10,000 with you. Is that right?
Yeah, but this was before that law actually passed.
Oh, really?
This was before the $10,000 reporting limit.
Oh, really?
But he had this cash money, and they ended up seizing his money. Well, they offered him a deal. We'll give you half of it back. He wouldn't take it. But it cost him about half of the money to hire a lawyer to get his money back.
Isn't that amazing?
And DEA didn't have anything. You know, when they take your property, if they came in and seized Jeff Overturf's $10,000, right?
Right.
If they did that, then they don't file a case against you, and you don't have a right to a state-funded attorney. They file the case against the money, so it'll be the United States government versus $10,000 in cash taken at this location, found at this location, and that's the way the case will read. You'll see a case about the United States government versus a 1968 Corvette, and the reason they did that is that all the seizure law is based on piracy law. A long time ago, they'd have these pirate ships that they'd seize. Then the owners would be in some other country. They couldn't get them, so they'd file a case against the ship itself. And if the owners didn't appear, then the ship couldn't defend itself, and they got it. And that's kind of what's going on.
That sounds like
asset forfeitures are like that. And I like to say that, I didn't ever see anyone intentionally screw people out of their money in my career because I don't think I would have put up with it. But at the same time, I saw it happening at a distance in other areas.
Right.
And that's a freedom. That's something that's kind of capping our freedoms. When I was a little boy, every little boy had a .22. Every little boy had a shotgun. We went out and shot. We went out and hunted. We did whatever we wanted, and we knew how to be safe with those. We didn't take them to school and start shooting other kids. We didn't shoot ourselves in the head. And nowadays, the average citizen, is having to really worry about whether or not they'll be able to have a Second Amendment, which to me is the same as the First Amendment. It's an amendment, and the reason you got the second one is to protect the first one.
Correct. Oh, I agree. Well, there's a lot of things like that are going on now. The Patriot Act and the wiretapping, and, I mean, it's just not like a domino effect. I mean, things are being eroded so fast. And I just don't understand why it's so important. I think that I talked to a couple of people on my show a while back, and there was this guy named he's an attorney. His last name is Lopez, and he said that what happens is like through different periods in history, law kind of leans too far in one direction as far as the power goes, and then after a while it's corrected. In other words, when they realize that it's being abused or it's not serving the general purpose for the general population or the people, then they have a tendency to move it back or correct it. I hope that happens.
Well, I'd like to think that happens, but I haven't necessarily seen that, happening all that much. I've heard that before, that same argument that it's sort of a clock, that society becomes more restrictive and then more permissive and so forth. And maybe that's true to an extent, but in the middle of it, we have to put up with people abridging our rights. We have to put up with a government that wants to tell me how I'm supposed to think and how I'm supposed to behave. Beyond, we all say that, if I have a freedom and you try to take my freedom away, then you've violated my rights in some way.
Right.
So that's John Stuart Mill's harm principle. Your freedom ends when it starts hurting me, and vice versa. And
right.
I think that's pretty intuitive. It's pretty clear. But all of a sudden now the government says, well, that's not the way it is. They're trying to turn the world into a rubber room, a Nancy Pelosi rubber room, where you've got nothing but everything that could possibly hurt anyone is taken away. It's rounded off. Every edge is rounded off, and everybody's supposed to play in the sandbox really nicely and do what Mama Nancy tells them to do, and I don't like somebody telling me how I'm supposed to live my life.
Well, a lot of that comes because we were, our heyday was in the 60s, and I mean, a lot of people don't realize what the 60s were all about, but bucking the establishment and, in other words, going against the grain, and not necessarily because, I didn't want to fight in Vietnam. Did you want to fight in Vietnam?
No, I didn't. I didn't dodge the war, though. I wasn't one of these guys that would have ran off to Canada or anything else. They came out with that lottery, and I had a high number, and I was glad because I had a pretty girlfriend.
Exactly. Well, I don't remember you going in, and I remember you in karate, so I guess it worked out okay. But, there's a lot of incidents like that have been happening. I've been worried every time I keep watching what's going on, the lying. It's like they used to keep everything quiet. Now with the media and the cameras and everything the way it is on the camera phones and all that kind of stuff, we're getting so deluged with so much information, and it's frightening what we're finding out. I mean, and, and then the way they try to put the spin on it, I would hope that sometime or some way we get the banks away from the federal government, the Federal Reserve, rein them back in, and do something to start putting some representation back with the people instead of the corporations. If there's anything that I think we need to do to get things fixed, I think that's it.
And I think so many corporations don't have any national loyalty anymore. At some point, you've got corporations that have a global loyalty, and so they invest in factories in China and Indonesia and India, and they outsource this to there and everything. And then all of a sudden, there's a national interest that comes up. They've got to fish or cut bait at some point here.
No, I agree.
And I think we need to get back to a sort of a nationalistic mentality where American values are good enough. We don't have to have some UN values. We don't have to
I agree.
recreate our laws and our Constitution to abide by what the UN thinks. And we created the UN anyway.
Right, exactly.
And
and plus
and we don't need to put up with that. Some of the crap that we do. We need to understand what our national interest is. So, yeah, I think that's something that I've been concerned about in my life. And of course, watching the presidential race, it's one of those things where you just hope and pray that we're not going to end up with the same thing we've had, because it's really
Do you believe in those polls?
Economy.
Do you believe in those polls? I don't.
I don't believe anything the media tells me anymore.
I don't either. I don't either. That's why I'm glad I have this show. That's why I'm glad we have Facebook, because, at least we have the opportunity to dig and find the information on the Internet, whether it's right or wrong. Because really what it boils down to, when it comes right down to it, it's what you see in your daily life is what you believe. Like the other day, I had a client bring in a paper because, I speak politics during the warm-up in my class, every class.
Right.
And so he brought me a piece of paper, and it was from a company in Dubois that sells nails, and they were getting their manufacturing in China, but something came down from the government and said, hey, by the way, you got to pay this tariff from now on if you want to sell those nails in the United States, or you're going to have to start manufacturing in the United States. And this guy from Dubois sent him an email, and I mean, he ripped the government to pieces about paying this high tariff. And I thought, well, way to go, government, bring back some tariffs. That's awesome. And that's what I pay attention to. You don't hear that in the media. No,
they're not going to give you that story.
No, they're not. But, I have a client that does robotics manufacturing. He creates the robots that does the automation to create the nails, the machines. Mm-hmm. And so he brought me this, and I said, now this is good stuff right here. This is what people need to hear about, and this is what people need to know. But, of course, nobody's going to be out there tooting that horn and talking about where our government's actually helping getting some manufacturing back. And I didn't know this till about 2 or 3 days ago. And I just thought, I thought it was still the same status quo, outsourcing everything, and get everything done, so that the corporate, leaders and, officers can make all the money and just blow off all the rules and regulations about employees, hiring, and, all the stuff that you have to follow. Just blow all that off and go to another country and get some slave labor.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I think there's some effort to try to keep that from happening, but it's always a little bit of effort. It's not a national kind of movement worth of effort. But we live in a more complicated world than we ever did before, too, Jeff. It's one of these things where we've got to. Our money and everything that we have is connected so much into the world now that something happens somewhere on the other part of the world, it's going to affect our currency and other things. I think that's a vulnerability, but I don't know how to avoid it in an increasing information sharing world.
Right.
It's a challenge. I don't know, but I think that the idea of a nation is kind of giving way to the idea of tribes. And we have the internet. We have the ability to, form connections with people all over the world that are interested in the same thing we're interested in, or that have the same ideology or whatever. And I can see it being moving from more of a nationalism to hey, my guys are all over the world, and we believe this, and this other group all over the world, they believe that. So we haven't seen the breakdown of nationalism, but we have seen corporations doing that. Corporations, going, global. Walmart, for example,
Right.
And with their factories in China and their emphasis on increasing, the production in other countries, third world countries, and then selling that stuff here in other places in Europe. But I think that we really are seeing a little bit more of a breakdown of what used to be a very secure national identity.
Yeah, I agree with you. Isn't it amazing that monopoly money can do so much damage like it has worldwide, the fiat money system that we have?
Oh, yeah.
That's amazing, isn't it? Well, hey, John,
it really is.
Listen, man, you have been a great call-in for my show, and we're going to get you back on the show again. And I appreciate.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate you asking me to be on here, and I was looking forward to chatting with you, and I think we had a nice chat.
Oh, I do too. It's very informative for people because this is what people do. When they go watch TV, it's like people go, I don't believe any of that crap. But when people talk to each other and they open up and they exchange ideas and, they divulge their perception, I think this is meaningful and it's helpful for everybody.
Well, I applaud what you're doing, and I thank you for having me on here, and I sure appreciate it, Jeff.
All right, man. I sure appreciate it, John. Thanks for calling in.
Stay in touch.
All right. Bye-bye.